West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
We have two readings this morning. The first is an excerpt from Deep is the Hunger by civil rights theologian Howard Thurman. He is just a lawyer with a breezy, free-willing manner. Why he studied law remains his secret. His interest is not primarily in making money, but he manages to carry his end of the stick without too much difficulty. Watching him function in a committee meeting or heeding the salty quality of his speech, one would not think of him as being religious in the conventional sense. On first encounter, one is struck by his apparent lack of inhibitions. His mind is like well-honed steel, vibrant, sharp, strong. His face is that of a man who has seen much, understood even more, and remains completely unafraid. There's no piety here. One hardly imagines seeing him kneel before an altar, though he does, because he prays best on the wing. The most deeply moving characteristic which he possesses is an authentic interest in people who are being harassed by life, and the discriminating use to which he puts his intelligent and informed goodwill. He is never too busy to counsel those who find their way to him, even though what they are able to give in terms of dollars is negligible or even non-existent. When he is faced with a complicated social problem concern, which the law is at variance with his high sense of decency and human dignity, an exhilaration is apparent in the quickened tempo of speech and the telltale flash of the eyes. Life seems to him to be a fascinating and even eventful adventure. When he has been most helpful by putting at one's disposal the results of his legal training and his fruitful years, he gives the impression that to be of service is a privilege and a joy. Second reading is Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. Imagination and intuition are vital to our understanding, and though the usual popular opinion is that they are chiefly valuable to poets and artists, that in sensible matters one should mistrust them. They are, in fact, equally vital in all the higher grades of science. Here they play an increasingly important role, which supplements that of the rational intellect and its application to a specific problem. Even physics, the strictest of all applied sciences, depends to an astonishing degree upon intuition, which works by way of the unconscious, although it is possible to demonstrate afterward the logical procedures that could have led one to the same results as intuition. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk
in its light.
I'll turn it over to Bette now.
Thank you, Ruth.
It gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce our guest speaker this morning, Nick De Silva. Nick is a psychotherapy and spiritual care student at Emmanuel College at the University of Toronto. Nick is a former Roman Catholic seminarian and now a religious pluralist and universalist. His professional areas of interest are esoteric thought and studies, existential psychotherapy, and the spiritual and therapeutic theme of finding one's power. Nick engages with Buddhist Vajrayana practices and is a member of the Freemason's fraternity. Nick has also been producing his hip-hop instrumentation for 14 years. He hopes to draw from his own lived experiences and deep learning to be one of many voices for the personal and social flourishing of the human community. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Nick.
Hi there, friends. Good to see you again. And thank you for sharing all your thoughts and concerns today in the earlier segment. It was very moving to hear. So today I'm going to be speaking on the theme of the power of the human person. I have been a psychotherapy and spiritual care student for 3 years now. And before that, I spent 3 years in intensive spiritual formation as a Roman Catholic studying for the priesthood. When I was a practicing Catholic, I was deeply committed to the work of the church. To me, God was fully alive in Roman Catholicism, and it was by obeying the teachings of the church that I was able to become fully alive. While Catholicism is not a totally monolithic entity in its understanding of the world and of spirituality, the culture within the church that I had specifically encountered as a young adult, having returned to faith, was one which was fundamentally skeptical about human nature. It was skeptical about all sorts of things that go on in the human heart. According to this church culture that I was formed in during my time as a young adult, the idea that I seemed to pick up from the culture was that human nature was a broken instrument, that when it was unguided by the externality, the external source of Christian revelation, without that, it could only function in ways which were bound to confusion, to dissatisfaction, to self-defeat. I had heard my fellow members of my faith community at the time say things like, if I don't pray the rosary every day, I'll go astray. Or someone would say, I feel God is the enemy of my happiness, but I don't know any alternative. And, I heard, this idea of, not my will be done, but let me give my will over to God, for only God knows what's best for me. So oftentimes there was a lot of sentiment of sacrifice and the inherent tendency of humans to become confused, to be disoriented. And these sentiments had an impact on me for a number of years, and they caused me my own sense of disorientation. I was fully aspiring to live as a Catholic, and I took on all these values and ideas that were swimming in the pool of this culture, but it came at the detriment of my own well-being and my own freedom of spirit. As this suffering and distortion began to accumulate within myself, I started to find ways to get out of that, to find new places of freedom. It was through this journey towards a new life for myself, in a sense of healing, that I found myself moving from fundamentalism to pluralism. In this new direction that I was charting for myself, I began to see a very different story for the human person. It began to unfold before my eyes as I was living a new way. When I saw over a period of 8 years of spiritual and psychological recovery, what I saw was a profound greatness, an ascendant power of the human nature, the power of the human person. What if, instead of being prone to disorder and dissatisfaction, human nature was far more intelligent, far more supportive, and far more encouraging than we realize? In our first reading today, Howard Thurman, he describes the profile of a civil rights lawyer that he worked alongside of. This man, this lawyer, who is not a perfect man, is described by Thurman as someone who lives with a breezy, freewheeling manner, but who has seen much, understood even more, and who has an authentic interest in other people who are struggling in life. Here we have a person whose life experience has formed them in a direction of authenticity, happiness, and genuine care for others. It is true that the man is known to engage in religious practices, as it says he's praying on the fly or he kneels before an altar on occasion. But Howard Thurman identifies these acts of faith as more of a unique quality among many in life of this man, rather than something that bears total force over him, as was the case for those who were in the church culture that I was at one time. So rather, what this reading of Thurman identifies for us is the unique freedom within human living as a whole. The problem with the church culture that I was initially formed in, and the problem with fundamentalism in general, lies with the mistakenness of giving up one's own right to experience life at your own pace. Human nature's power lies not in perfection, but in authenticity. Not perfection, but authenticity. The work we do is not in measuring up to an external standard, but in living day by day in fidelity to what is most real to us at this given time. We don't know all the answers. We don't have the perfect picture of life. But we can continue to live. So if we have goals in mind for life, if we are trying to move towards something, a place that is better that we see as important for us. So if we're trying to develop a career, or we're trying to find a new rhythm of life, we naturally, when we begin on that road to a new rhythm of life, we will naturally encounter all sorts of challenges. And these challenges, we might call doubt or fear, confusion, tiredness. These are all going to come when we head on a new road. And, sometimes that might seem to us like a character defect of ourselves, a flaw. And I think that sometimes can become overwhelming. But yet, these negative feelings, these negative experiences from when we go on a new path, they're not the last word, are they? If we avoid continuing on to a path, and we avoid it, then every time we return, those feelings will come back up again. And that may be a cause of dismay. It might make us doubt ourselves. It might doubt our nature. Why are these feelings coming back up? And in times like this, it becomes a temptation to want to give our freedom over to something external, to say, this is what defines me. It's very difficult sometimes when we encounter challenges. But this seeming human imperfection, it's only a problem when we try to solve it. I think that as a psychotherapy student, I've learned a lot about feelings and thoughts, negative feelings. And, ideas, there are theories around feeling and thought, like dialectical behavioral therapy, for example. And dialectical behavioral therapy will tell you that thoughts and negative experiences, thoughts are just thoughts. They don't necessarily mean this is how things really are. When we have a new experience, negative thoughts and feelings, they come to the surface. That's just part of how it goes. And, our challenges of life will always have negative experiences. But part of the way we engage with these new experiences is identified in our second reading by Carl Jung. So in the passage, Jung identifies the power of imagination and intuition, as these are equally valuable in living life, just as much as the rational mind is. So imagination and intuition, they can be deployed in search of our higher way of living. So, for example, in negative religious spaces, the imagination can be taken advantage of. So sometimes myth, which is an important part of a culture, myth can be used as a way of asserting an authority upon us. And so it takes advantage of our imagination, and it makes us conjure up catastrophic thoughts about what will happen if I fail, what will happen if I don't agree. But the imagination can be incredibly positive for us. So some musicians are able to see music before they perform or write it. Scientists and physicists, they see the beauty of a scientific system. They imagine it just as they connect it in their mind. And for people seeking change in either their life or in the world around them, they can begin to see a new way of living, an alternative to the reality that is currently present. They can imagine a new way in order to bring it into being. So imagination is a way of breathing life into this expanding universe. So when we encounter struggles within ourselves, the imagination can help center us. It can help us remember and recall what's important, what is that driving force in our life to keep us moving through. In times of distress, we can sometimes lose that track of what is important for us in keeping us centered. Yet, once we make the decision to act, that vision, that truth in us becomes part of our reality. It becomes real when we act based on our values and what's true to us inside. At first, taking on new commitments, there's that anxiety, that exhaustion, that discord. But then, eventually that gives way to joy and freedom when we make the choice. The power of living comes from inside of us and all around us. It's what makes hope possible, and it makes it worth appreciating. False faith demands absolute answers to timeless questions. And in the church culture that I grew up in, there was always an answer they had to have for the problems a person was going through. But rather than provide quick and easy answers, let's become present to what's going on. That act of being present, that begins our living. The greatest benefit we can be to ourselves and to those who are in need of our support is to be present. Once again, presence, like many good things, is not perfection. In our presence, a person's response to the challenges in their life, they can finally have a space to emerge. When we're with a person and they're having a hard time, and in my training, they teach us the most important thing is your presence. You don't always have to say the right things, but when you're in a state of openness to the other, when you can be present to yourself, then the creative process of life begins to take shape. Your presence helps the other person find a way into that moment, into their authenticity. And that, once again, Carl Jung, he values intuition. Intuition is that part of us that when we're being present, we find our way of living into this new moment. So, for example, intuition is characterized as a sort of a sensitiveness or a higher awareness. And it's part of our way of it's a type of intelligence, our intuition. And have you ever had a moment when something strikes you, you're going through life and something strikes you and you have what they call an insight? There's something emerges in your life where things change. You finally have a handle on the situation that you were dealing with. This is part of our intuitive intelligence. And so when we're present to others and when we're present to ourselves, we can let our own truth come through. This is what I've learned through my own spiritual practice in Buddhism and in contemplative practice tradition. And so when you're present, it's a mutually beneficial. You are experiencing the other person's light, their own incredible depth, and you're giving your own in a way that isn't like some restrictive religious cultures might say. It's not trying to. We don't have a goal or an agenda for another person, but we can be our best selves in these moments. This process is what I see as our true self. In Buddhism, it's the Buddha nature, the true nature of the person. And so when we are with one another, that is our power. The true person begins to emerge. And so, we might not necessarily have all the answers in the world, but we can begin to engage with the questions that are at the root of ourselves. And in doing so, that sustains us for the journey ahead. That allows us to live into what is most important for us at this moment. And we might not always be able to, have, our insights, our experience might not be the same for another person's, but it can provide others with another angle at which they can experience their own life, their own challenges. And so, this beautiful process of coming alive, as Howard Thurman calls it, of living authentically, that authenticity, that to me is these moments of reverence, this bowing before an altar, as Howard Thurman talks about. But instead of bowing to an altar with an authoritative patriarch at the head, maybe that altar is a boundless ocean of love in our heart. It's a mystery of life that we can't quite put words to. But that reverence, that awe is a part of our journey as human beings, that beauty. And so that to me is the power of the human person. It's authenticity. And it's the ongoing living and journeying of the heart and the mind. And so that we can, when we see things that are important to us, we move towards that. Howard Thurman, he asks, what is at the root of your longing? So what is at the root of your longing? What is at the bottom of your heart? That longing is a sign that you have much to give and much to receive. And that is something special that is coming your way in the great response we have to this life. So thank you.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.